Welcome to the Untold Science Women in STEM podcast series. This series is an initiative to foster gender inclusivity in science, regionally and worldwide. It's to bring inspiring talks and conversations with pioneering women who have significantly contributed to the world of science. Today, I'm truly excited to welcome someone whose work is shaping the future of science, technology, and innovation, not just in the UAE, but around the world. Our guest is Dr. Hoda Alkhzaimi, a powerhouse in emerging technologies and a champion of women in STEM. She is the Associate Vice Provost for Research, Translation, Innovation, and Entrepreneurship at NYU Abu Dhabi, where she helps turn groundbreaking research into real-world solutions. Her journey is nothing short of inspiring, with over 20 years of experience in advanced science, industry, and global economic strategy. Dr. Hoda has led initiatives that range from cybersecurity and artificial intelligence to quantum technologies and space systems. She has been at the heart of major projects across the UAE and globally, securing investments, building teams, and pushing innovation forward. She is as well currently the national expert on advanced sciences and future economy. And while that alone is impressive, what stands out even more is her commitment to empowering women locally and globally. As a president of the Emirates Digital Association for Women and Ambassador Emeritus for Women in AI and Arab Women in Computing, she has opened doors for so many others to follow. Dr. Hoda Alkhzaimi, thank you for being here and welcome to the Untold Science. We are honored to share your story and perspective.
Thank you, Nas, and everybody in the team of Untold Stories for hosting me today. Thank you. This is humbling extremely, and thank you for such a warm introduction.
Let's begin with your personal story. Can you take us on a quick journey through your life and career? What first sparked your interest in this field?
That's such a very deep question, I would say. I started my career early on. I don't know when do you realize you start your career, but you start a passion that leads you towards this pathway. I think early on, when you are trying to choose in between what university you're trying to champion or what field of life you want to impact in. And I was always wanted to strike a balance in between arts and sciences. I didn't understand why we have to choose in between arts and science. I had a very, very lucky encounter in life to be mentored by an amazing grandmother who pushed me through the barriers to make sure that I excel in both arts and sciences. So I really got, in all senses, a huge sense of passion for all scientific subjects. And I excelled in all scientific subjects and as well in artistic subjects. So the minute I hit the university, I know that I wanted to do something related to science. I spent the first year in medicine, and then I did a pivot and a shift of my life to electrical engineering because I wanted to make sure that I actually innovate and bring things to life. And later in life, I changed to, I would say, computer engineering and information security because I wanted to do crypto. Don't ask me what's a crypto. To me, crypto was a fascinating field because of the contributions of people like us, the Arabs of the region, of how they brought in the Kindi and others who brought in the codes, and the fact of how decoding a specific, scripts from different civilizations was such an important task of scientists slash fully scientists, I would say, because they weren't capped into one category. They were ping-ponging in between all of the fields of their potentials and passion. So you could see them being scientists and you could see them being artists and everything else. And to me, it's a field that is very interdisciplinary. So that was my first encounter with crypto. I went from there into an investment fund that was tasked of diversifying the economy of UAE. And looking at the journey of UAE for the past 50 years, you would know how critical this was 20 years ago. And I think I was lucky to join just at the initiation of the team. And our task was to invest in emerging technologies or emerging industries in general that are based on critical sciences and critical knowledge and know-how development. and bring in the curation of developing the R&Ds here into UAE, starting with grooming scientists, locally Emirati scientists, as well as international scientists, and the development team and the whole stack that would contribute to economic developments of opportunity in UAE. Of course, we leveraged international partnerships. So we were working with international partners and companies across different jurisdictions to make sure that we start this partnership journey, I would say, in creating the innovation in UAE through creating different joint ventures between different jurisdictions and then working into this. While I was doing that, I got very passionate not to deactivate that sense of scientific curiosity. So while working, I also was very intrigued by not just being someone who's good in practice and investment and economic development and everything. I wanted to also retain my scientific curiosity. So I did a degree in mathematics and cryptography. And at that point of time, the percentage of women in this field in us was quite little. I was shocked. It was like around 12% of my class, only women. And I came from UAE where like almost 70%, if not 80% of my engineering class were women. And I did that, of course, in France because I was stationed internationally. And then I did my PhD with one of the best cryptography group in the world, I would say. I'm biased, with Lars Knudsen, who was one of the godfathers of crypto and cryptanalysis that stage, and still, I would say, with many kind of inventions, or I would say applications, that was very flagship in our research. And when I got into the PhD journey, I realized that actually it's only 1% of women that exist in the field of crypto at that point of time. I did that while working still on these projects. I have a very supportive, I would say, CEO at that point of time who understands local Emirati, who understand the power of knowledge at this niche frontier industries and the power of educating his project managers and his staff who's leading on creating the next wave of industry in UAE on that sense. I came back to UAE, I worked two projects and then shifted to academia, worked with NYU for the past 10 years in establishing R&Ds in cybersecurity, and then other R&Ds in emerging technologies with my research group. So I've been extremely humbled and I would say very kind of privileged to have this journey throughout my life.
It's very interesting the percentage you mentioned now, from 70% in UAE to 12% in France to 1% in crypto. How do you see these percentage nowadays? Are they still the same?
I love your question. I think they're definitely improving, I would say, across the map, especially when it comes to crypto. I would say right now, crypto is not the same kind of dry academic scientific field it used to be. It's more of as well of a financial field that women want to invest in. So the percentage is definitely gaining attraction. So I would say we are at almost 5% to 7% in this field when it comes to women who are working in economic structures, financial structures, and as well working on academic structures. Now, is that percentage severely high? No, still very niche, and we need to do more and more of work into this. This is why in 2022, we launched our fellowship program for women in crypto through Emirati, my research group. And we launched it particularly in the continent of Africa because we want to start improving the pipeline in the most least represented, I would say, spaces in the world. And we have accomplished many kind of strides in improving the numbers. I'm sure that the more we have of those kind of efforts globally, the better of representation we would see, equitable representation we would see for everyone and not just for women.
Actually, this is impressive that you are trying to amplify these voices. And I just want to touch base when you spoke about how your grandmother helped you shaping your choices, sort of. So let's talk about the people who may have also inspired you. Whose contribution in your field deserve more recognition, especially those who may not be in the spotlight? I think your grandmother is already one of them.
100%. I've been raised in an environment where we should pay a huge level of acknowledgement to everybody, especially the people who are not I would say, the celebrated heroes or heroines of the stories. And my grandmother is one of them because she did not receive a formal education. She was a person who is diligently a champion of education herself. She wanted me to be a professor from day one. At the time where I didn't understand who is this professor personality that she wanted me to be, she actually advocated for me to work abroad internationally. And she came from a very humble origins and beginnings in UAE, but she believed in the vision that Sheikh Zayed created and in the mindset of everybody in that era, in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and 80s of UAE, as well as 90s, when he said education is one of the most important pillars of this country. He was a high advocate for women education, women autonomy. And she was at the age of 82 when she passed away, and she still insisted that we have to be champions of education and champion of women growth and development across board. That being said, I was lucky enough as well to be championed by many people. My CEO, my ex-CEO, for example, was one of them. He's not anymore with us here in life. He passed away, unfortunately, God bless his soul, 2016. But he was an extreme as well champion of talent, undermined talent, I would say. He believed in potentials and not just IQs and smartness and all of these type of cliche attribution to success. He would understand and believe in the diligence of hard work and would always push you through the barriers in a very subtle way, in a very unnoticed way behind the scenes. So he believed on this notion of sponsorship. I'm sure you've heard of it, where people are not just your mentors, but actually they're your advocates. They're your champions. They're pushing you through the barriers, making sure that pathways are elevated for you and created for you. And I did not realize that at that time. The fact that he allowed me to be part of his working capital team and as well be a contributing member to my academic research was not an easy decision for a fund that was very competitive and established around 50 conglomerate structures of high economic driven values in UAE and internationally. We were on the run, but he believed in his team and he was there for me. So I would give him that kind of recognition. His name is Ubaid Al Mansouri, God bless his soul. And as well, I would say other people, I have multitudes of people that I think contributed to my journey, my students, people who are constantly messaging me day and night sometimes. People who know me, they know that I'm available at the tip of the fingers if you want to reach out to me. And sometimes I receive these encouraging moments at times when I feel like, why, as a woman in science, it's not always an easy journey. It's not always an easy pathway. And as well in economy, it's not an easy pathway. You have to always push for establishing a voice. You have to always as well, I think at a certain point of time, and I don't know if this is only something for women, you have to always validate your credentials around the table. So the voices that I get from my students, the voices I get from people who I don't know sometimes and who tells me, you are a role model to us in UAE. And I did not realize that I am that role model. I'm humbled extremely by their constant support, by the constant reach out that comes across the map. My supervisor, I think, goes without saying, across different projects that I worked with, who were very genuinely, constructively, professionally, I would say hard, but very honest and fair with me throughout this pathway. It was a learning journey for all of us, I think, as a team who were part of this progress. I can't give you a few names because there are so many who contributed to this journey, honestly. And one thing I learned from, I think, my grandma is the fact that when you are building a role model figure in your life, don't just choose a name. Make sure that you appreciate the people who are servicing you or the people who are at the peripheral vision of you. You don't know, maybe at your blind spot, equivalently as the people who are at the prime stage of your career. So I would say hundreds of people helped me be here today, and I wouldn't be here without the work that even was invisibly been put through by the, the fathers of this country, of UAE, Sheikh Zayed and others, and as well by the other women, the Emirati women who came here, who sacrificed sometimes their education for the sake of raising a family, for the sake of making sure that the next generation is still here contributing around the table, I would say.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this success story. But we know that it did not come out of nothing. I would anticipate that you had faced sort of challenges. Have you ever encountered any social expectations or internal beliefs that you had to figure out challenges for you as a woman in STEM?
So something that challenged my core social beliefs for women in STEM. I think I would say my answer to this question would vary if you ask me at different stages of my life. At the early stages of my life, when I was within the UAE community and society before working internationally, I always felt empowered, equal, and having the same voice in the room as anybody else. So I did not sense any kind of social exclusion, I would say, or the fact that I'm not an equivalent part of building this community and society in UAE. On the contrary, I felt the responsibility structure that I am supposed to be a contributing member of this economy, and I'm supposed to think of a very creative way of how can I build UAE as everybody else who is trying to build this success story across board. But working internationally, I started understanding that there are certain enablers and disablers of women positioning, and like when I realized, why are we 12%? Why are we more than 12% in France studying this niche field of mathematics and crypto? Where are the rest of the women voices in the room? Because I thought that coming from less developed country, perceivably by global economic standards, I would see much more equitable structures being put forward for empowering the position of women. And that's, I think, the first fallacy, I think, or the first untold, I would say, false truth that was there in the room. And the second conversation that I had around that 1%, why are we 1%? Why? Because I remember having this conversation with my fellow colleague from Lithuania who's doing statistics, and she's like, why are you the only woman in that group? I was like, why am I the only woman in that group? I didn't realize actually I'm the only woman in that group because I wasn't born with the fact that you have to contribute to these lenses. And later on in life, when I got into board positions and got to decision makings, process and leadership, I knew that it's not enough to have a pipeline of women at the early stage of education. You need to make sure that it's a systematic growth across all kind of career paths to leadership positions, because the voices of women at leadership tends to trickle down to zero. And then sometimes because of that, we don't recruit enough women around the room to be brought into different equitable structures, even if it's in science, if it's in academia, if it's in different aspects. So the toolbox, I think, for supporting women presence in research or in science or in academia or in economy is not 100% there. You will always have to find your pathway, push your way, find a specific structure for you to exist. Because let's face it, decisions are not made most of the time in board meeting rooms. And most of the time, they're not equally, I would say, fair. They might happen in social corridors, in the certain cliques that might be easily accessed by males than females. And when that happens, how can we make sure that we still attract the decision-making process to our credentials rather than to the only the social norms that exist into this space?
This is very interesting of you, because the way I see it, that from the very beginning, you were encouraged, let's say at the level of your family, within the UAE, you did not see any boundaries, but when you went to study abroad, then you started to see more challenges, which you did not see it and face while here in the UAE. But having you coming back to the UAE and participate in the movement of working on gender imbalances and leadership position, do you see that is influenced by any cultural values or local traditions, especially when women are making their choices toward their careers?
You mean particularly globally or in UAE?
Now I'm taking it back to the UAE.
See, I think from the lenses of collective experience that I have, I think being here, born in UAE, is such a privilege, because I've felt as a woman that I'm empowered to be my full truth of contribution, bring my full truth of contribution to this economic value, to UAE, to the social value of UAE. And that expectation for me to be a contributing member was consistent across board. So it gave me that kind of a privilege, I would say, to walk through any boardroom, any kind of conversation, any conference room, any research venue, knowing that I deserve to be in that room. I'm expected to be in that room just for the sake of me being me, not me being a specific gender. And
Yeah.
this level of empowerment, I would say, and for certain people, they consider it entitlement. It actually came from the fact that I was
Yeah.
born here in UAE with this innate, I would say, superpower for me
Yeah.
thinking that
This
I
is this is very powerful message. So your identity as an Emirati woman influenced how you lead and collaborate, and you help shaping research in the UAE. So this is very empowering, I think, for all of our listeners, and especially people residing in the UAE. Let's turn toward one of the most powerful forces in innovation, diversity, and inclusion. Do you believe we can truly innovate without having diverse voices at the table?
yeah, I mean, the answer to this question goes without saying for me, in essence, like, how can you solve all the problems of the world with almost half of the world being unpresent? I mean, if you're talking about, because inclusivity is not just gender, it's ethnicity, it's different minorities group, it's nationalities and other kind of demographic groups that would exist across board. So I think if you're solving for a problem that matters for humanity, and that's most of the scientific kind of breakthroughs around the world, you might as well bring humanities on board, not just as recipient of that breakthrough, but as a contributor in building this R&D structure, building the science, understanding and digesting that they are an equal contributor to the process, regardless of what process that. So I think no, definitely. We can't build a holistic solution with just muting specific voices in the room and having that kind of ivory glass vision that we are superior to anybody's opinion or anybody's identity, capacity, and potential to bring growth in the room. I always believe in potentials because I feel that they're surpassing IQs, they're surpassing resources. Because the minute you have the potential of growth, the potential of bringing value, you're unstoppable force. You can bring resources, you can compensate for any IQ losses by acquiring knowledge and by building that towards that gap, offset. And you can learn how not to just be technically good, but humanly good, socially good, politically good in any kind of conversation, I would say.
Can you share with us an example where working within a diverse team led to a powerful or unexpected result?
Well, I would say I worked in so many projects where the value creation that happened through co-creation process was amplified. I don't want to just mention the global breakthroughs, okay, that we have across board. Many women around the world brought an innovation to light. I mean, we know that the innovation around nuclear discovery of nuclear elements by Marie Curie came from a woman and many other things. And she's part of the diversity pool. We have many other women scientists in computing, particularly, who contributed to the innate field of computing. And without them, we would have a massive loss of knowledge that would surpass decades. But on my personal perspective, I worked multiple times on building R&Ds. And I think when I bring this kind of inclusive vision, working with teams across board, then we are very much paying attention to nonsense and details that we can miss from the scripted work. Because when you work on science, you work on a problem, and this is a problem, you have to look at it from a very objective lenses. But bringing this kind of multi 360 view of the problem sometimes, where you have, let's take AI, for example. If you have the lenses of the scientists, the lenses of regulators and legislators, and the lenses of biologists, and the lenses of people who are working on ethics, and the lenses of people who are working in psychology and human element, then I'm sure you will build a better type of technology than just bringing a tool to the environment or to the hands of the user where you can just prompt it for Q&A and provide intelligent questions. I'm sure you will be very mindful of the biases that it can bring to people, to the kind of this innate details of how it might impact privacy spectrum of people, if it will be used for the people or against the people. And this would help us bring much more ethical technologies and sciences in the hands of people. We're talking today about the high spectrum ramification of using PCI technology coupled with AI, brain cognitive interfaces, where someone could tap into brain signals. And then if you put them in an open AI model, what would that translate to in terms of privacy, of understanding your own biology? Because you're building that agency and giving it to a machine, and the machine can analyze you and get to know the profiling of all your biological weakness before your understanding for those kind of weaknesses. So I think those 360 view, diverse view of how we build the technology is something new, by the way. For the past decade, we were building technology that are functional. It's very commercially available. It provides return of investment. It provides growth for companies. But we haven't been thinking of bringing ethical spectrum of technologies that would be as well constructive, I would say, to building a better humanity. And those are I think, the mass of conversations that we have today in science. How can we build science for value and science that is actually disrupting the solution process that we build for different humanitarian aspects? Like, how can we bring energy in disconnected areas in the world? How can we as well improve the livelihoods of people across the world and build this kind of equitable infrastructure of science and development across the map? Why are we mining, for example, minerals in Africa and then building the devices in the north part of the world without providing enough know-how development, learning spectrum for people as well in Africa, so they can also be developers of those technology in their home indigenous countries, rather than them traveling and migrating across the universe and facing migration issues. So I think these conversations are not just scientific conversation, as you can tell. It transpasses that to policy work, to geopolitical, I think, science, and many other aspects, to elevate, I think, the pain that our humanity is having today because of many of inequalities that are being engraved because of the lack of human governance in the system.
Talking about the support you got earlier and the mentorship, do you think that we need more support in terms of policy changes or having some kind of mentorship programs? What do you think can take us today to a better representation for women in STEM?
This is like a kind of, I think, a very active, controversial topic at the moment. Because for me, what is the difference between having a mentor versus having a sponsor versus having a champion in your life? In my career, I really had mentors. Most of the time, where I think I had pivotal moments in my life, it's because of those champions and sponsors who came in my life, and they had a stake in decision making and using their collective network capital and using their as well resource capital, sorry, to provide pathways and solutions to elevate my positioning, because they saw I think the disparities and positioning that existed in between males and females into the ecosystem, or because they were just interested in having equal voices in the room. So to me, mentorship sometimes can be washed topic, because most of the time people are passive when they are mentors. They provide advice, and sometimes advice in a space where minorities, and not just women, and minorities in general, don't have a toolbox of solution, is not enough. We need advocacy. We need as well sponsorship and championship for people to change the ecosystem, and not just to change the ecosystem, but hold people accountable towards the change that we want to build. Just building a policy and pinching it up into the system is not going to be enough, because you need also the policy enablers, the policy champions, the policy activators. So it will be actually a de facto process. Also, I'm a huge believer in just also nudging the ecosystem collaboratively and having this kind of participatory approach to how you develop a solution. you need to develop with the ecosystem and figure out how can you co-create the process and the solution to provide that a kind of equitable pathway of existence to the voices in the room, or everybody in the room, not just gender, not just women, I mean, into this spectrum. So my ultimate say is you 100% need sponsorship today and championship for those causes of inclusion more than just mentorship. And maybe we need to tune down the conversation a lot around mentorship and advice because it's not enough. It's passive, it's not active. And for the current dialogue that we're having, even globally on this, where we're having political voices marginalizing the importance as well of inclusion in a community that we were born with a human right of being included, we need active participation of the whole society to make sure that this is a global norm, to bring people on board and to make sure that they are included, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their gender, because it's what we have been, I think, as a value system. This is a very strong value system for me as an Emirati Arab Muslim kind of scientist and as well person and a human in this universe. So, number one rule, activation through participation again and championship. Maybe later on in life, when we are solving the problem, then we can go to mentorship. I don't know. Like, I'm always worried about this statistics that tells you it takes 300 years to close the pay gap in between women and men. It's such a dire knowledge. Again, I feel privileged. I live in a country where we have a law and regulation that tells you it's equal pay structures in government and in as well private sector for men and women. We are very privileged that we're protected by legal structures in here, and to know that it's not the same type of protection anywhere else in the world is quite concerning.
I can see clearly that you can be not only a mentor, but a great role model. So I will not ask you more about mentorship. However,
I hope, I aspire to always make it.
La, this is very inspiring. If you could fast forward 20 years, what would you love to see changing in the STEM community?
20 years from now, I would hope that we don't bring out the topic of women in STEM anymore, that it's a de facto role where it's a systematic change, where it exists seamlessly across board. I would hope that we would have seamless pathways for women to be professors, to be educators and academics, to be as well scientists, and making it easy for women and seamless as well for any type of other structure of minority group to be included in the field. Also, to believe in science, to believe in the fact that we as a human have multitudes of potential of contribution, and we should be able to serve not just in our narrow expertise or such focused expertise lenses, but in the breadth of interdisciplinary science that exists today. I think the next 20 years is not going to be about this solo scientific journey across different fields, but it's going to be for the collaborative structures that you can build to establish breakthroughs and opportunities in multiple fields all at once, just because of interdisciplinarity nature of collaboration. And this is something that we can see today. If you are asked you about the number of breakthroughs that changed the previous 20 years of humanity, you would tell me, compare that to the previous, I would say, 100 years. 100 years ago, it would be one or two or three breakthroughs that we'd mention. But in today's era, you would mention easily around 25 breakthroughs that are reshaping the life of humans around the world. So I would say going forward, we'll face the existence of more breakthroughs because we have more access to information, more access to knowledge, and more access to equal participation from the whole of society, just part of the society. And I would hope that we will not spend much more effort to still, validate or build awareness on the necessity of having women in any field, of the necessity of having equal, equitable access to, I would say, resources in every field. I would say to have more of what we are having here in UAE in terms of impact replicated across board and celebrated, because we in UAE, we proved, and I think that's something that we should be proud of, that solutions can be made in indigenous communities like the UAE, the community here in UAE, and being showcased globally and celebrated globally. And we are, as I would say, what we've been called in a political structure, small nation, still a powerful contributing nation in this humanity.
Empowered, yes. This might seem like a different question, but it can tell us more about you. If your STEM journey were a storybook, what would the title be and why?
I think I would call it the multiplier effect. Just because I believe that whatever we have been graced with down our journey in terms of opportunity, we have the human duty to multiply it for others. If we were blessed by access to education and access to healthcare and access to opportunities, because we were born in certain circumstances that are very privileged, we should spend a lifetime journey and validating a multiplier effect of opportunity for others. Because the more you share the platform, the more you share the wealth, and wealth not in materialistic financial way, but the wealth in a potential way, because this is a potential that is being built in you to change the world, then the better this world will be in terms of independent problem solving that comes actually from different cultures, different voices, and different champions across board. So I'd call it multipliers, the multiplier effect.
Yeah. I like the title already. Dr. Hoda Alkhzaimi, thank you for sharing your powerful story and insights. Your journey is a reminder that science moves forward when bold voices lead the way. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to follow the Untold Science for more inspiring stories from the women shaping STEM in the UAE and beyond. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries of what's possible.